Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Firm Returns Weekly. I'm afraid this week I'm a little bit under the weather, so if you get any abrupt, well, I'll try and pause it before I sneeze or anything like that. But yeah. So if there's sudden jumps in the video or whatever, you'll know it was because I paused it to save you the trauma of watching me blow my nose. Yeah. So this week we've got a couple of updates on Warner Bros. Discovery and tinyBuild. So quite a few on each one. So quite a bit to get through, but not so many companies in the portfolio this week. Just a reminder to anybody that's only listening to them, only seeing these on YouTube. There's also a newsletter. So if you like the written stuff, that will come out to you can sign up over on firmreturns.com, and that's what you'll see when I share my screen as well. That you can sign up to there, and you'll get it in your inbox. There's also two other newsletters on the site that you can sign up to. The portfolio updates. So every time I buy or sell a position, it will be I'll put out an update which you'll get, so you can see the exact monetary amounts as well. So you know exactly how much stake I have in different companies and so on. And then there's also, if you just want the audio, the other newsletter is stock analysis newsletter, which are when I do these bigger, longer form write-ups. You can see some of the older videos or podcast episodes, the ones that are like 2 or 3 hours or whatever, are where I've done an audio or video version of me reading through one of the long write-ups. But they're typically sort of, I think my longest one was about 10,000 words, but 5,000 seems to be a fairly standard length for them. And yeah, they obviously go into a lot more depth. It's a proper deep analysis on individual companies as opposed to these weekly updates, which are just an ongoing tracking of the positions and looking at whenever earnings come out, whatever, just quickly glancing over them, but not really doing any detailed analysis. So yeah, those two. And then finally, just to mention that if you just want the audio version, you're not really interested in watching any of the video, you can get they're all on podcast players like Spotify, Google Podcasts, I think, and Amazon Music are the main ones, and then lots of other ones. I don't think they're on Apple, but yeah, all those main ones which you should be able to get across whatever phone or whatever you're using. So yeah, so you have a look on there for the Firm Returns podcast, and you should see me. And I've shared all these things. They're all available on my site. You can easily find links to them from there and on Twitter and other places. So right, let me just share my screen and I'll get into the meat of this update. So let's have a look. Do this one. Okay, so starting off here with some Warner Bros. Discovery news. And the first thing to talk about is Mortal Kombat 1, which released earlier this week, I believe on the 19th, which was Tuesday. So released on Tuesday this week, and it's got off to a strong start. It's had a peak, so using the data we can see on Steam, we had a peak concurrent player count on the day of launch was 38,129, which is actually quite a bit. Well, not a lot higher, but it was higher than the previous entry in the series, which was 35,147. Its peak concurrent player count, and it's been holding pretty firm in the days since. It's sort of comfortably above 20,000, normally about 24,000, I think, is the lowest it's got to as a daily peak so far, but it will obviously come down. So yeah, really good numbers. And as a reminder, the previous game, Mortal Kombat 11, sold over, I think, 12 million copies in its first 2 years of launch. So obviously we've got a way to go before we get to the 2-year mark. I'm sure most of those came fairly upfront, those sales. So yeah, that's if we're looking good as a comparator for what it could maybe do long term. And reviews are looking pretty good. I think a little bit lower than the previous entry from Steam, but still around about 75% of the reviews, and there've been 5,654 of them so far, have been positive. So it's very good. And it's still in the top 10 bestsellers, and it's spent most of the time since its release in like the top 5, I'd say. But we should get some numbers as to where it sat in the rankings of the UK boxed charts, they call it, which is the physical copies sold in the UK. It's quite a useful guide as to how well it's done in console sales, because there's obviously still quite a lot of physical copies sold for consoles. So yeah, we should get the figures for that. Maybe mid next week we'll find out how it did this week, where it sat in the rankings. Yeah, Hogwarts Legacy I think was the top for the prior week, so that's still rocking in the rankings for consoles and physical copies sold. So yeah, just given these numbers we have here, I'd give like a rough estimate that maybe it's done 250,000 copies sold on Steam or PC more generally, because most of PC sales are done on Steam. And that would be factoring in that, there was quite a lot of pre-sales done, quite a lot were done. People got the premium edition, so on. I think 250 is probably a pretty good ballpark estimate. Could be less, could be more, but I think it would be well on track to cross the 1 million copies sold mark across all platforms, including consoles, pretty soon if it hasn't already. Obviously, we're still just in the first week, but yeah, I'd expect definitely to cross 1 million within the first couple of weeks. So yeah, that's that. And there was also on the gaming side of things for Warner Bros. Discovery. There was with the Competition Market Authority investigation that's been going on because of the Microsoft Activision Blizzard deal. There've been some leaks of Microsoft had to provide some of its Xbox data to the various parties involved in investigating and making a decision as to whether the acquisition can go ahead. And quite a bit of this data has been leaked, so we are able to see it. And some of this data relates to the estimated costs for basically Microsoft or Xbox securing games for the Xbox Game Pass, specifically AAA titles here. So, and there was I think 4 games in there that in the list that were Warner Bros. Discovery games. So, it's kind of I thought it'd be interesting just to mention some of these. And like I say, I've given a link here to the full article you can go and have a look at as well. But yeah, the first 2 were Mortal Kombat 1, which is obviously just released, and then Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, which is set for release in February next year, I think. And both these games are very big games. Mortal Kombat 1 is a NetherRealm one, and Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League is the first sort of Rocksteady game since Arkham Knight, which was obviously very acclaimed. So those 2 games were both given estimates of $250 million. And obviously I don't know whether they are actually. There's been no announcement as to whether they will be, whether there has been such a deal formed, but that's kind of Microsoft's estimate of what they think they'd have to pay to get either of those games. So it's $250 million each to get them listed on Xbox Game Pass. Obviously, still they'd be sold individually. But yeah, this is for people to just be able to, anybody that's subscribed to Xbox Game Pass, to be able to download them and play them for free, with no extra fee beyond their subscription price. And then we also got given some info for Gotham Knights, which was the game that came out in 2022. I think it was Warner Brothers Games Montreal, Warner Brothers Studios Montreal, something like that. And this game, I don't think it did quite as well as it was compared to some of the Arkham games that had come before it, and it was quite different. It was much more, it had multiplayer aspects and what have you. And I don't think I think it probably did okay, but I don't think it did anywhere near the success of the other ones. But anyway, to get this game put on there, they're looking to pay $50 million. And interestingly, they actually announced fairly recently, as his Xbox announced, that it will be coming to Xbox Game Pass on the 3rd of October. So it looks like this deal has been signed. So presumably for $50 million or close to that figure. And then finally, has Lego Star Wars: The Skywalker Saga, which has been on Xbox Game Pass since December last year. So another one that we know the deal was actually signed. And this was estimated to have cost Microsoft $35 million. So again, don't know exactly how accurate these are, but it gives you some interesting ballpark figures. So the big announcement beyond the release of Mortal Kombat 1 was that live sports is now coming to Max. So this was a big announcement put out by the company. They're going to be adding a new tier to Max, which is going to be called the Bleacher Report tier. And Bleacher Report, I tried to do a bit of digging into. It's something they mentioned quite a lot in the earnings call, stuff like that. And obviously, I'm based in the UK, so I don't really get exposed to it. Maybe someone who's US based and maybe younger, because that seems to be their target for it, could let me know exactly what the offering is from this Bleacher Report thing. But there seems to be some video component to it, and also some news component. Like if I just look on their website, the Bleacher Report website, it's a pretty average looking news site. Not particularly amazing website either. So I'm kind of questioning whether that's the real product they're talking about here. There's some platform, some app or something that people are viewing all things through. But I don't know. But yeah, anyway, they're calling this obviously in an effort to try and make the sports offering appeal to and to draw some of the younger audience to Max, maybe. They're calling it the Bleacher Report tier, and it basically everything that they have, all the sports they have live access to on their cable channels, like TNT and so on, will be getting simultaneously streamed on Max as well, and there'll be other things, other programming around it, and now pre and post match analysis and all that kind of stuff, and then sort of video on demand things as well. So old matches and things like that you can, and older sports related content that you can, and documentaries and things like that you can view anytime. And this tier is going to be, there's going to be a promotional period in which anyone who's subscribed to Max in the US can get this tier for free. And that promotional period will last until the 29th of February. But then there's also going to be, so after that period, it's then going to be an add-on tier, which costing $9.99 a month. 1 second. Yeah, so that It's good because there's obviously going to be a promotional period up front where I guess it doesn't really cost them anything. The gamble is, so if people were to suddenly cancel their cable subscriptions and move across during the promotional period, then that it would effectively cost them some money. But if nobody really moves across in the cable, but it draws in people that weren't previously subscribed to Max across, and now are drawn because of sports, it doesn't necessarily cost them much initially during that promotional period. But yeah, it is good that it is going to be an add-on tier, because that means that people that don't want to watch the sports don't get penalized. So next we have Aquaman 2. So this film is set for release on the 20th of December this year, and I've just put a link here to or embedded the full-length trailer if you want to have a look at that. To me, it looks quite good, interesting enough story and what have you. But yeah, and I think if we were to look at, as I've probably mentioned before, the first film did particularly well. It did, I think it was the highest grossing DC film ever. It did over $1 billion at the box office. So yeah, I had pretty high hopes for the sequel. But yeah, I've been reading some stuff recently that has got me worried a little bit that maybe things aren't going to go quite as well as I'd hoped, and I've got a link to an article here going into detail of some of those concerns. But just to give you some of the key things I've pulled out of it. So the film's had multiple reshoots. Partly this is because of some of the things that affected the Flash as well, and Black Adam and other things like that, is them cutting out scenes that had cameos from other characters that are no longer going to be in the DC universe and things like that. So they've just had to like edit plots on the fly. Characters that have been baked into the plot have now been removed, and so had to rewrite plot at the last minute, do reshoots and things like that. Obviously adds costly things to it. And part of this has been Peter Safran coming along, who's the director of DC now, alongside James Gunn, and he's been coming on as a producer for the film, and it's been evidently picking and choosing bits that adding his and James Gunn's new vision for DC to the film, which had obviously largely been, probably a lot of the filming had already been done when they came on board. So it's obviously going to be quite a messy process and costly. So they've had multiple reshoots to resolve that. There also were some fairly poor receptions, from what I understand, from early screenings of the film. So that's meant that people they've wanted to change bits and pieces to make it a little bit more, to make it better received by audiences in the future and perform better. And then, of course, unfortunately, we've seen again some talk of bad CGI, which is something that we saw with the Flash as well. And yeah, it's unfortunate to see. That was when I went to see the Flash. I thought it was overall a good film, and there were just a couple of bits that just took me out of it when they, especially the sort of time warp kind of singularity stuff that was going on. The CGI was particularly bad in that bit, and some of the early stuff with the hospital with the babies and stuff is also a bit weak. Just kind of not what you expect at this day and age. It was unfortunate because a lot of the Batman stuff, the Batman chases and later scenes and all the fight with all of with Supergirl and everything like that was all great, and I just wondered why that couldn't be replicated in the other sections. But anyway, yeah. So unfortunately, it sounds like there might be some similar concerns with Aquaman 2. So hopefully that stuff's getting resolved, because that's definitely going to have an impact on the film if it isn't. And finally, the other potential negative is that we've got another thing that's caused reshoots as well. I understand, or certainly a lot of cutting and reorganizing of the film. Is the fallout from the Amber Heard and Johnny Depp trial, which occurred since the first Aquaman film, and this has meant, I think they've basically they've cut her out of most of the scenes that she was originally supposed to be in. So her appearance is much smaller, and obviously she's supposed to be like the wife of Aquaman, so and the mother of the heir to the kingdom and all that kind of stuff. So having her suddenly cut out of a lot of it is going to make, when she'd had such a large role in the previous film as well, it's going to be quite interesting for the plot. But we'll have to see. But yeah, it's not been a great year for DC so far this year. I think a lot of it is because of the change of direction. We're kind of these are all legacy projects that were kind of in place and already had plots and what have you, and plans from before the merger with Discovery. And so it's now, yeah, they're now kind of getting, we've had projects cancelled, like the Batgirl film. I believe there was a Batgirl film that got cancelled, and a few other things probably as well. And then you've got projects that are getting kind of butchered and reconfigured and ended up not doing particularly well on release. All trying to get things moving towards or setting things up for the new slate of films, which are obviously going to be much more carefully done and will be under the things like Superman Legacy, for instance. The first sort of really big one, I think, in the series is going to be under the direction of James Gunn. He's written the script for it and everything. So yeah, it's fully within their scope and pure in that sense, I guess. So hopefully things will start getting better once we move into that. I think obviously we've got what they now call in the Elseworld films and series, like the Joker and the Batman and what have you. And they're staying exactly as they are. So hopefully they'll, as they come out, second Joker film next year, and then I think second Batman in 2025, they're going to still hold the same feel and what have you, and won't be impacted by these kind of DC universe changes, because they're kind of separate from the main DCU. But yeah, so I think that wraps up Warner Bros. Discovery. So yeah, moving on to tinyBuild. We saw the release of the San Rafaela DLC for Cartel Tycoon this week, on Friday. And this was with a price of £12.79 or $14.99. But they also released it alongside a 55% discount for the base game, which I think is intended to, it's quite a standard sort of model when they release a new DLC for a game, is to launch the base game with a discount to draw players in and try and buy the two together. Yeah, drawing new players. Yeah, and as you can see from the graph below here, so we've got a nice this new DLC has generated a pretty nice uplift in current players, taking up to sort of around the 400 mark, where previously it was sort of around the 150 to 200 daily peak number. And yeah, given that this is a substantially larger volume of content than some of the prior updates. I mean, it's almost a new game in its own right. It's an absolutely a massive new map, loads of new features, new campaigns, new characters, everything. So it's a really sort of game changing update, and so plenty of content for people to explore and to go through. So I think I would expect it to sort of keep things elevated for a bit longer, perhaps than some of the other ones have done, just because of how big it is. Yeah, it's good to see this sort of uplift, because that means there's been sales of the DLC. So yeah, all around pretty good to see. And then I also wanted to mention, I thought it'd be a good time to revisit some of the wishlist rankings for the upcoming releases from tinyBuild and Versus Evil. And these are ones I've covered before, and I've put a link here to the previous update where I gave these numbers. I might get that up now, so we can have a look at that, do the comparison. But yeah, I've mainly chosen the ones higher up in the wishlist rankings, and obviously this is just Steam data. There are, there's the release pipeline is quite a bit bigger than this, but yeah, the pipeline is quite a bit bigger than this. But a lot of the other games have got lower Steam wishlist rankings, perhaps, and not as so many followers on Steam. But they might be games or franchises that have a much wider player base on consoles. I'm thinking things like Kill with Fire is probably an example of that, or Totally Reliable Delivery Service. These are games I think they did quite a bit better on consoles than on and probably something like Cryptic Cove as well. I expect that will do particularly well on consoles. It's a real couch kind of game. So yeah, the player base I expect to be quite a bit bigger on those than on PC. So yeah, let's just have a look at the ones that we know are looking pretty like they've got pretty good prospects just from the Steam data that we have. So first up, we got Streets of Rogue 2, which is now number 94 in the wishlist rankings. So I mean, I've mentioned before when it broke into the top 100, but we're now moving up further. And then obviously part of this is to do with games that were higher up coming out, but it does mean that new games haven't come in to replace them further up. So it's yeah, it's great to see, very promising. And I'll just have a quick look to see what rankings were before. So yeah, I mean, Streets of Rogue was back at 130 before they started really releasing a lot of the new footage for it. I can read that. So yeah, really moved up quite substantially. Back then we got Ferocious, now 137, so close to where Streets of Rogue was, and that was back at 146. So that's made quite a nice little move up. Not really seeing much marketing going out for that game. Maybe I haven't really been following the game directly, but not seeing much through tinyBuild stuff. So kind of all just moving up organically with people finding it, I guess. Or maybe there is some more marketing going in the Twitter and community and so on that I'm not seeing. Then we got Broken Roads, which is now 143rd, and this was back at 170th. So it's really moved up. And this is the one that we now know the release date, I think, is 12th of November, 14th of November, something like that. it's in November. So that's looking very promising. Then we've got Sand at 247th place. And this one is still a way off, just like Ferocious. It's still a way off. Though we do have some. Well, I suppose we have a little bit of footage for Sand as well. But then yeah, this was back in 270th, so it's now moved up a little bit as well. Level 0, which is now, so yeah, the Broken Roads level 0 are both versus Evil, also Stray Souls, which we're going to go into a second. And then Streets of Rogue 2, Ferocious, and Sand are all tinyBuild ones. So level 0, no, sorry, what was I saying? Level 0 is a tinyBuild one as well. That's not a versus Evil. So level 0 is 293rd, and previously that was 318. So yeah, it's moving up nicely. And I think this one's level 0 is supposed to come out this year as well, though we don't have a concrete release date for it yet. Yeah, so finally, Stray Souls. So Broken Roads and Stray Souls were the two versus Evil ones. Is in 459th place in the wishlist rankings, and that's up from 491st. So still making steady progress there. I'm not sure if we have a release date for Stray Souls yet, but that is another one that's definitely coming out this year. So they've said. So yeah, Streets of Rogue 2 next year. Ferocious Sand, we don't know exactly which year they'll be. They're a bit more ambitious ones, so I expect maybe it would be 2020, maybe 2025 or towards the end of 2024. I could be completely wrong. Ferocious in particular did look like it was quite advanced. That's one that I don't think has got so much. Yeah, hasn't got. It's not quite as ambitious, perhaps, as Sand or Deadside, in that it's not quite as open world and massively multiplayer or whatever as those games are intended to be or are with Deadside. So yeah, Ferocious might be one that we see coming up next year, but it'll be interesting to see with Sand as well whether it's one that comes out as early access, like Deadside has been. We've had some more updates from Deadside. It's taken a nice little bump in the players, but it's just a kind of a quality of life and a few bug fixes and other little things. Not any major new content in this latest update. But yeah, they are coming out pretty thick and fast now. I mean, I've been playing that game just for a few months now, really, and we've already seen something like 3 updates since I started. So it's been quite impressive the rate at which they're putting them out. And we've got some pretty big ones coming up, like adding a new city, possibly going to be getting at some point wheeled vehicles as well, new animals like wolves and things like that to worry about. All sorts of stuff coming down the track. But yeah, so all looking promising from the wishlist rankings. Everything's moved up nicely since the last time we looked at it, and obviously we had I Am Future actually got released. So I have to see where Broken Roads ends up if it gets into down to a similar level as I Am Future when it releases 135 or something. I think it's got a similar. It's got about something like 15,000 followers. Anyway, yeah. Finally, I just wanted to mention just a final reminder that the interim results for tinyBuild are going to be released next Tuesday, the 26th. There's a few different things around these results, and I'm planning to attend. One is an analyst call, which will be at something like 2 in the afternoon. I think that's sort of like you have to register, get an invitation to attend to that one or whatever, which I have secured. So I'm hoping I should be able to attend that one and get some. So, but that I don't think that's one that will be recorded and then released at a later date or anything. But then there's a wider sort of investor call, which anybody can just come along to. You just need to sign up to investormeetcompany.com, and even if you miss it, you can come back and re-watch it or re-listen to it at a later date. It's kind of good if you do have any questions for that, you can sort of preload a question for that. It's quite good to be able to do that. Or you can ask a question during the session as well. And then finally, there's another presentation occurring the next day with a group called Mellow Events, I think it's called, like a sort of private investor community type thing. And there's a few different companies presenting around their sort of results and some other talks and things going on. But it's a fully online event. So yeah, you just sign up. I think it was like 20 quid to attend or something. So I've signed up to that as well. So yeah, I'll try and put together as much information as I can into next week's newsletter and videos and so on that come out subsequently. So yeah, I think that sums it up. I will say goodbye now before I start sneezing and things again. Apologies for any jumps in the video or audio as I was trying to pause things and so on. But yeah, I will catch you all in the next update, and thank you all for listening.